Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Resilient Health Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Darin Ingels, and joining me on the show today is my friend and colleague, Dr. Kelley. Dr. Kelley is a medical doctor and graduate of The Ohio State University. She's also a functional medicine doctor. She's on the board of the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, aka ILADS, and just all around terrific doctor. So, Dr. Kelley, welcome to the
Oh,
show.
thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, you and I think we probably have very similar practices and that we get, very difficult, complex illness. You and I were just talking before we jumped on here. It's like we feel like, people are getting sicker and sicker. It's getting more challenging, difficult to treat these very, very complex illnesses, which almost hardly ever involve one thing, right? It's like this multitude of things that kind of stack on top of each other, and then people are left with this, varied collection of symptoms. They've been to multiple doctors, specialists, often without finding answers. And it's just, I feel like, it's so overwhelming for people, and particularly those who've been in the game for a long time and they feel like they've tried everything. I think, today it'd be really useful to talk about, maybe going back to just the basics. When we talk about health and healing, I think sometimes the big shiny thing sounds like the magic bullet. And I don't know about you, but my experience is usually the things that are really expensive and really high tech are often not the best therapies for really inducing healing and wellness.
Mhm.
So, what are, when you're talking with your patients who, again, who've been, kind of dealing with chronic illness for a while, where do you start with them?
Yeah. It's a great question because I agree. I think the complexity has been ratcheted up over the years, which definitely keeps us engaged, right? It makes us think, and we're always kind of looking at that. But it's always a good idea to go back to the basics, and I call it the groundwork for healing. And for me, it's kind of five core tenets, and this is what I really try to touch on in my new online course: is how are you eating? If food is medicine, so let's start there. What's your diet like? If you are eating McDonald's every day and drinking a Diet Coke, you're not going to get better. So we have to address that. Um, how are you sleeping? Sleep is so important to overall healing, and it's tough. That can be a really hard one to deal with. How are you moving? Which is also really hard for all these chronic patients because they're in pain or they're too tired. Like how do we add movement to that? And how are we dealing with stress? And I think so many people ignore that tiger that's kind of always behind us, kind of setting us, and then we get used to it. And then I always add in detox. That's kind of my bonus for my top five. And even when we're better, it's always a good idea to go back to that baseline. My goal is always to kind of get people to that spot where we're starting to thrive again. And I always warn them, when you start to dip again, go back to those basics. Go back to those five. Like, which one of those can you improve to make a quick dip so you go right back up to feeling really good. So I think I like those foundations. If they're not there, it's really hard to do everything else and get the system working properly.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's break it down. I mean, you talked first about, diet and eating, nutrition. Of course, I would agree, as a naturopathic doctor, I mean, like, food is medicine is really the foundation of all health. What is your advice on, getting people, particularly, like I said, if they're used to eating fast food and Diet Coke. And I know, again, when people feel really terrible, food is comfort, food is emotional. I mean, I
Mhm.
totally get why people
Yeah.
sometimes go off the rails and eat
Yeah.
food that maybe is not the healthiest for them.
Mhm.
How do you help, guide them to kind of getting to eating, whole foods,
Mhm.
nutritionally dense foods?
Yeah. I always try to kind of gauge where my patient is. I am more on the 80-20 rule versus the strict, has to be perfect diet because I think that just adds more stress. And for so many of us, our plates are so full of stress already. If we add the extra stress of the rigidity and the perfectionism that's required, I think that just makes it worse and kind of defeats the purpose in some ways,
Right.
right? So it's, where are you? What is your diet like right now? What are the things you like? What works, what doesn't, and what are the changes we can make to slowly implement that. And on the flip side, if the patient needs to rip off the band-aid and go right in to the hardcore eliminate everything diet, that's where we need to go. But most people, I think it's, let's start with the one thing. Let's build from there. Then we add the next thing and the next thing. And it's about, I always focus as well when we're trying to cut stuff out. So we're trying to cut out inflammatory foods, gluten, dairy, sugar, processed foods. It's not just about what we can't eat. I also try to really focus on what we can. So what are the new things we can try? Have you ever had a sun choke? What's that like? How do
Yeah.
we make this taste good and be fun and an adventure and not a strict I'm being punished type of thing. So I think it's all about
Exactly.
approaching it and really trying to make the best of it and build and make those changes. So it becomes more regular and it's not a diet, it's a food plan, it's a way of life.
Yeah, I think there was a time where, eating healthier may have been a bit more challenging, back when like the regular grocery store really didn't sell organic food and you maybe had to hunt and pack a little bit more. But I'm not sure how it is in Chicago, but out here in California, I mean, all of our big grocery stores, you don't have to go to Whole Foods or the big expensive stores. Costco and Target and these big retailers now carry a lot of, I say, organic produce and organic foods, and they're a lot less expensive than going to some place like Whole Foods. So it seems to me that it's probably easier now than ever to have access to healthier foods. And I see a lot of people too where even the thought of preparing a meal can be a bit overwhelming. But again, a lot of these places have good prepared foods that are cleaner, they're whole foods, they're not filled with preservatives and additives. And it just seems that it's a little bit easier to start making those changes that
Mhm.
we want everyone to do.
Yeah, there's so many more options. I agree. Even just gluten-free. And not gluten-free junk. Just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy. There's just so many more available options to implement these into your life. 100%, I agree. Yeah, it's a lot easier. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to make these big changes, but it
Well,
definitely helps that there's more access.
yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I know food's comfort, and I know that it's just easy for people when again they're not feeling great to reach for the stuff that's not so great for them. But I tell my patients like, look, it took you a long time to develop this pattern of eating, and because it is exactly that, I don't expect it to be the overnight. I mean, God bless the people that can go cold turkey and make that change in a day, but that is not the majority of people at all. It's a little bit, baby steps, a little bit at
Mhm.
a time. And yeah, this week I'm going to try a sunchoke. This week I'm going to try one or two new foods.
Yeah.
And in that same time, I'm going to eliminate one food I know is not good for me.
Yeah.
So this may take several weeks or maybe even months, but
Mhm.
it's the end game. It's not the expectation that all this is going to happen immediately. But if you understand that this is what we're working toward, and then ultimately this really becomes part of your lifestyle, right? It's not like I'm just going to do this for 2 months and then I'm going to be healed and I can go back and eat the way I used to.
Yeah. Right, right, right. And it's that 80/20 rule too. So I think most patients when they start to eat better, they feel better. And it's hard to keep up with it, but if we can kind of wrap our heads around not being perfect, but 80% of the time really doing the best we can, and 20% of the time maybe cheating here or there. My rule of thumb though, if you cheat, you have to enjoy it and you have to relish it. Right. So if it's your kid's birthday party and you have that birthday cake, you can't just shove it in your face and feel guilty. You have to sit and really enjoy it and and like be okay with it and settle into it and not feel guilty or shame that you went off diet for a minute, right? So I think that's important, and that's all leads to that stress. And you're
Yeah.
saying like the comfort of it too, but we can get so stressed out and like being so perfect on the diet that it just makes it worse. And so, yeah, you have to enjoy it. That's my rule. If you're gonna
I,
cheat,
I,
you have
I
to enjoy
like
it.
that. So the second thing you talked about is sleep. What are your thoughts on, helping people get that good, deep restorative sleep?
Uh, yeah, I wish this were a really easy fix. And for some people it is, but for some it's there's so many layers to the sleep issues. Is it trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep? Do you snore? Do you grind your teeth? Are you dreaming? Are you having night sweats? There's all these questions we have to ask to really try to get to the bottom of what's underlying the stress issues. And sometimes it's just, okay, they admit that's their time at night and that's their alone time. So they stay up too late on their phone. So that's, potentially an easier fix. But some, especially with these chronic issues and the brain inflammation, it's hard to sleep and you want to sleep and you're exhausted. So it can take a really long time. So I try to gather as much information as I can clinically and from the history, and then we'll do some tests. Maybe we need to do some adrenal testing or nutrient testing or other things to kind of go in that and just try to kind of try different approaches to get them to fall asleep and or stay asleep. But yeah, gosh, that can be a sticky one. It can take a bit.
It is, I would argue, one of the most challenging things, at least I see in my practice, of helping people again get their sleep pattern back on track. Because again, often it's been disrupted for months, if not years. Again, they've tried the litany of medications and sometimes even supplements, and sometimes it helps temporarily, but often it's a bit of a band-aid and not really getting that circadian rhythm back on track. And I agree. It's like, I think testing can be very valuable to find out the core of why. Do they need a sleep study to find out if they have sleep apnea? Is it really just a cortisol dysregulation? Is it a woman going through menopause and it's hormonal? And but because there's so many different reasons, we need to understand that as practitioners because the treatment's going to be potentially very different. We can't throw melatonin at everybody and expect it to stick.
Yeah, yeah. If only it were that easy.
Do you have specific things though that you find that you use fairly regularly that do help people? I mean, I know it's a very general, like I said,
Mhm.
it's a lot of different reasons, but are there some things that people might consider trying just to see if it can help them, maybe get a little better sleep?
Mhm. Yeah, I a lot of my patients, it comes down to adrenal
Yeah,
issues in their circadian rhythm. So there are some different adaptogenic herbs, and doing the testing can be helpful because if their cortisol is too high at night, that's often why they're not able to fall asleep into that deep, restful, restorative sleep. So there's some adaptogenic herbs that take a good couple months to kind of get back down. But I will employ lots of different tools. So binaural beats perhaps at night or hypnosis, trying to turn off Wi-Fi. And then, in the morning too, trying to get some sunlight into the eyes to help with that circadian rhythm, even if it's not sunny out, but getting outside in the morning, getting some actual light in there to help reset that rhythm
right.
in there. Those are a couple things. I also, especially if it's an adrenal issue too, I like a good small fatty or protein filled snack at bedtime
Yeah.
to help keep the blood sugar more stable because those adrenals are going to regulate the blood sugar and that can wake you up. So that can also just kind of keep things a little more steady at night. And sometimes like a handful of pistachios is all it takes to kind of
Yeah.
get you to stay asleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find that works really well for a lot of folks. And you kind of briefly mentioned, but I want to kind of hammer it home this idea of, being on electronics at night. I think that is probably one of the biggest disruptors for people. That blue light that comes off your iPhone or iPad, kind of tricks your brain into thinking it's daylight. And
Mm-hmm.
I say, 2 hours before you go to bed, to cut off all electronics. I'm okay, read. I'm okay watching TV.
Yeah.
The TV has a different light than the personal devices like the iPad or the iPhone. But I think just getting in the habit of good sleep hygiene,
Yeah.
sleep is a pattern. It's actually a very complicated pattern between hormones and neurotransmitters, and all of that isn't in sync. Your ability to get that deep restorative sleep, and again, that's when the body repairs itself. That's when your
Mhm.
brain detoxifies.
Yep.
So the more you miss of that window, the harder it is to catch up
Mhm.
later.
Yeah. And I think as adults too, we forget, when we have kids, we try to get them ready for bed. We have to get them to unwind. We have to give them a bath. We have to read a story. It's like calm down time, right? And as adults, we don't do that. It's go, 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 go. And then we get on our phone and we're like, why can't I sleep? I don't understand why I can't sleep.
Yeah,
But that's that. Take a deep breath, change this. It's bedtime. You've got to get into that calming state. So turn off the electronics, turn off the emails, take a bath, take an Epsom salt bath, read a book, do go back to some of what, our parents had to do for us when we were little. It's like, adults are not immune to that. We need it too.
exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like I said, there's some really great adaptogens out there. Things like rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil. I'm a big fan of Siberian ginseng, which actually isn't a ginseng because Siberian ginseng actually keeps cortisol in your blood longer. It doesn't force your adrenals to try and make more cortisol. So Siberian ginseng in the morning actually can be really helpful to regulate the adrenals because a lot of times we think about regulating at night,
Mhm.
and Siberian ginseng is one of those great plants you can use in the morning to help balance it during the day too.
Cool.
So, yeah, getting that rhythm is really important because
Yeah.
pretty much anybody with chronic illness I see is pretty stressed out.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Which I think takes us to one of your steps there. Step number 4, I believe, is managing stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is a tough one too. Like I said, I think a lot of people are almost immune to it. We ignore it. Being a working mom, there's always a million things running through my brain. And our bodies are not designed to have that tiger chasing you all the time, right?
Right.
We need to relax and like, oh, okay, tiger's gone. But I do it. I'm a culprit. I'm culpable in this. The tiger's just always there. And so my level of stress, I'm fine. I'm not stressed. Yes, you are. You're just not even recognizing that you're stressed. So I think part of it is just actually acknowledging and recognizing, okay, there's a lot going on. There's a lot on my plate. I don't necessarily do enough to help manage it. Maybe it's maybe I do need to do a little bit more. Maybe I'm a little more stressed out than I realized because we're just so used to it. It's not healthy. This is not good. We don't know how to relax.
I think that's a great point. I think people have been dealing with it so long, they don't know what normal is anymore. They don't know, I mean, what it's like to be in that truly relaxed state. And if you think about it, your body is designed to function basically in a relaxed state. Digestion and your nervous system and your heart rate and your breathing. I mean, all this functions best when you're in that relaxed state. And the more we kind of drift away into that sympathetic drive, that overload, it's hard. So we see people with all these digestive issues and their blood pressure's high and they're having all these other things, and you kind of look back and go, well, yeah, it's like your your body's been dealing with this chronic stress for so long, you've just kind of got stuck in that on mode, and it's just very can be very difficult to turn that off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do utilize a lot of vagus nerve retraining or limbic system repair and things of that nature too to help reset it. And I'm again mindful to not add more stress. So the last thing I want to do when I'm trying to, help someone de-stress is add more stress. So here, now you have to meditate for an hour every day. Now
Yeah.
you have to do this. Now you have to do this. And it's just more check boxes to check off. So I do try to look for some passive ways to start to incorporate this. So I like wearables, for example, Apollo Neuro, and there's some other
Yeah.
vagus nerve kind of stimulators or binaural beats too. There are other things that you can just kind of put on and not have to add one more thing to my life. And then when you start to incorporate that, then it becomes easier and easier to do the meditations or the other things that we need to do. But I like to kind of step into that and start to support the stress system in that way. For most of my patients, that's generally been a good place for me to start to help to unwind
Yeah, I
that stress
mean, we've
level.
talked with other guests on the show about this, but there's often again very simple, easy, and often free things people can do to again get their body in that relaxed state. Simple as focused breathing, and there's
Mhm.
different variations of that. Where breathe in for 7 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, blow out for 7 seconds, hold for 7 seconds. You can also do it for 4 seconds if you can't hold your breath that long. But the idea is that controlled breathing actually stimulates your vagus nerve and automatically get your body to start relax. And again, that is completely free. You can do that by yourself, and it doesn't take very long.
Mhm.
Dr. Stephen Porges wrote a book called Polyvagal Theory. You can read the book, which isn't terribly expensive, but he's also got like videos
Yeah.
online on YouTube that you can learn how to do these different exercises to again stimulate the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
So we have, and again, you can go take a walk.
Yeah. Humming. I like to hum. That's one of
Humming,
the things I will do is
singing
kind of
in the
walk around.
shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yodel.
all these things can be really helpful and again, free. So again, there's some pretty
Yeah.
cool devices out there. I've got a
Mhm.
Truvaga that I like as a vagal nerve stimulator, and I
Nice.
find personally it helps. But
Mhm.
again, if you don't want to spend the money on devices
Mhm.
like that, there is a lot of very low hanging fruit for free.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell people to use thing like a red light when you're driving
Yeah,
or bathroom breaks or commercials or whatever as a just a signal. Oh yeah, I gotta breathe. To help remember to do it because we got to remember to do it. And we're not very good breathers either. We
yeah.
tend to, in our culture, use our shoulders and not use our diaphragm. And yeah, so if we see that signal, oh my gosh, I'm at a red light, I should breathe. And that can go a long way too to help remember to do it.
You also talked about movement. I just remember when I was dealing with Lyme disease, I could really barely get off the couch. And my first thing was literally I plopped in front of the couch and it was just stretching. I mean, that's about all I could muster up. But again, it was a start and it was still a type of movement. It was still moving lymph, still moving blood a little. And then eventually it was walking around the house and then walking around the neighborhood. And, it can grow from there as your strength and stamina build. So, what are your thoughts on, getting people to move when they feel like that's just too much?
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was POTS. So I would be too dizzy. I'd have to sit down and I couldn't do the movements and things that I wanted to do because I was afraid I'd fall down and hurt my head. So I think you have to kind of understand what your parameters are, whether it's pain, fatigue, dizziness, like where your stopping point is. And it's not about running a marathon. It's not about, being hardcore, joining a HIIT class, doing all the things. It's what can you do that
Right.
day? Yeah. So is it just sitting in front of the TV and stretching? That's great. That is movement. That counts. This progress, right? I just want people to not be stagnant. Because yeah, our lymphatics rely on that movement, our blood, our brain, all of these things require some of that. And so even if it's a little bit, and even if it's walking to the mailbox and then resting, do that, and it will build and get better. But I also want people to kind of recognize where their limits are and not push it. We talk about like a lot of personal trainers and things like that want you to, push it, push it, push it.
Right.
But this is, with these with our chronic patients and our mitochondrial dysfunction and things that occur, if we push it, then we pay for it for 3 days. And then you can't do anything for 3 days, and you feel like you're back at square one. So it's about learning like, okay, I can do a little bit and then rest and then a little bit and rest, and then kind of slowly, slowly building that up. I also think it's important to find things that are fun that you like to do. So I am not a runner. I don't like running. I'll admit it. That's just not my thing, but I love to walk. So, or dance, and some people love golf or gardening. That counts as movement as well. So, and sometimes it's just carrying the laundry upstairs. If that's your goal, work on that goal. Like what are the things that you would really like to do or that you can do or you can't do right now? Make dinner, stand up and make dinner. How do we get you to that spot? And how do we use the confines of, your dizziness, your fatigue, your pain to help improve man? Are there things, do we need to get a physical trainer involved or personal trainer involved to help so that you're doing it safely? Let's say you have Ehlers-Danlos and mobility issues
Right.
you know but for me it's about, again, everything is kind of in the same frame, I guess, but it's these slow steady improvements so that we can continue to build and it becomes more natural and like you said, I can stretch and then I can walk and then I can walk around the block and then that's huge. Those are huge improvements and it all builds up.
Yeah, again, I like to do as much as you can do on your own, again within safe limits. But don't be shy about asking for help, and ask your doctor for a referral. Maybe you need a physical therapist to
Mhm.
teach you how to do some exercise to build certain muscle groups, or maybe you need a body worker to help work on certain areas that might be tight or spastic or giving you difficulties. There's a lot of really great practitioners out there who are very skilled in this type of work, and sometimes having that help can just make it so much easier to be able to do these things that maybe you feel like you're a little bit more limited in doing.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I know the fifth step here is detox, and I know this is like a 3-day seminar.
Yeah. I always call that the bonus, if you will, because I just think we live in such a toxic world and our bodies are designed to, but to I don't think they were designed to deal with this load that we have in this current day and age. And don't forget, we bioaccumulate. So I've got my mom's toxins and my mom's toxins and all of that kind
Right.
of built up into our system. And I also don't think we should live in a bubble or live in fear. So yeah, there are toxic things, but we can start by going to ewg.org maybe and looking at the Dirty Dozen vegetables and fruits and trying to avoid those, or the skincare and trying, or cleaning agents, and trying to kind of find ways we can reduce our burden of toxicity. And then, using foods as much as possible then to help turn on our detox pathways. Your cruciferous veggies, right? Sulfur heavy onions, eggs, these kind of things to help that process, increasing our fiber. It doesn't have to be necessarily a full blown, you know, 2 day or 2 week juice cleanse or something.
Right.
We can start to make better choices in what we're being exposed to when we're putting in our bodies, and then make sure that we're putting things in ourselves to help flush things out. Um, and yeah, like you said, like we could go on and on and on about ways to support detox and different tools in that. But um, again, start simple, kind of build up. And then, I don't know, some other things like Epsom salt baths are also pretty simple and really
Yeah.
relaxing and can help flush out some toxins, and movement is good for toxin movement as well and kind of helping to clear it out. Gut healing, make sure you're pooping. That's also a good one. I can go on and
Very
on. Stop
important.
me.
Well, again, there's so much, we can do that I think is, free and easy, or at least relatively inexpensive. I'm personally not a big fan of these short-term detox. It seems like every influencer now out there is selling you some program and my 7-day detox boot camp. And the reality is that detox is a long-term thing. Again, the way I always think of it's like filling up a bathtub and draining at the same time. It's just which process goes faster. If we can drain to the bathtub faster than it fills up, we're good. If it overflows before we can drain it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I would argue that most people with chronic illness are probably not great detoxifiers. I mean,
Mhm.
that's why
Yeah.
they're chronically sick.
Yeah.
Why is it some people can be in mold and not get sick, and other people it makes them deathly ill? It's your ability to clear those toxins before they bioaccumulate and create
Mhm.
all these different symptoms. So I
Yeah.
like strategies that really become, again, something that's part of your life and just not something you think about doing. And it's not to say that you can't do kind of a kickstart
Mhm.
detox
Sure.
program, but if you think I'm just going to do a week and I'm good, I think that's a little misleading and a little disingenuous. It's going to be a longer term course than that.
Yeah, and we do rely on some supplements too to help these patients. Can really help mold and Lyme and other things like glutathione, milk thistle, binders, as needed and wisely used, to help really push that a little farther. Often because these are chronic patients, I agree, have a harder time detoxing, whether it's just genetics or the burden or whatever is going on, all of the above. They need extra support. So, food and Epsom salt baths may not be enough, right? So we usually have to add some extra in there to help that process on a daily basis. And then over time, as we're getting better, then we don't need it as much and we can cut back and we can just use food. Over that's kind of the goal is get to that spot. But often we really do need to give extra support to start to move stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about detox without at least mentioning sauna. I mean, it's one of my favorite non-pill ways of detoxifying. And Dr. Stephen Genuis, who's published a few studies on sauna, basically showed we get rid of just about everything when you get in a sauna. I mean, pesticides, herbicides, toxic metals, mycotoxins. So there's so much
Mm.
health benefit to sauna. Again, it's not something everyone necessarily has access to, but
Mhm.
if you can and if you can afford to have one at home, it's just so much easier where you don't have to worry about keep going someplace to do it. And there's a lot of really great companies we work with that have the little portable saunas, or you can do the big box sauna depending on how much real estate you have to commit for it and your budget. But again, it can just be a very efficient way. And again, you can control the time, you can control the temperature. I find
Mhm.
some people when they start doing it, they detox too quickly and they feel quite terrible.
Yeah.
It was too hot, it
Yeah.
was too long. So
Yep.
you can scale the temperature back,
Mhm.
scale the time back, and again, just build up as you feel like you tolerate it.
Do you have a preference as to the kind of sweating and sauna that people use?
I generally recommend infrared sauna just because infrared radiation gets a little bit deeper. The steam saunas probably aren't as efficient as promoting detoxification, but the Dr. Genuis's work was specifically on infrared saunas.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I tend to use with my patients. And again, they seem to do pretty well with it. Again, I think where people run into trouble is just the time and the temperature.
Mhm.
It's very easy sometimes to
Yeah.
think, yeah, I mean, I've been out in the heat before. I do okay. And then they spend 30 minutes at 135 or 140 degrees and they come out and they're like, wow, I feel really terrible. Okay,
Yeah.
it was too high. It was too long. Scale it
Yes.
back. And then you can kind of build up as you feel like you're tolerating.
Yeah, I agree. When you start to mobilize things and you're not used to it, it can be an onslaught. to the system, and the cytokine storm that is created from that can make people feel really crummy. So it's all about starting low and slow and building up to that. I have some people that can only do 5 minutes
Yeah.
to start off with. And like I will always mention to people too when they start to actually sweat. That's, because a lot of our patients too, when they start this, they do 5, 10, 15 minutes and they don't sweat. They don't sweat for 30 minutes or 45 minutes sometimes when they're first
Right.
starting. But as they do it more, and then they start to within a few minutes sweat. And now we know we're making progress. Now we really know that we're really making some headway in your detoxification pathways and your overall health when we can get you sweating.
Well, it's interesting. I was at a conference not that long ago. I was talking to the chief scientific officer at Relax Saunas, and they make a portable sauna. And one of the things they were going to start studying is they were going to put people in the sauna fully clothed for 5 minutes. That's it. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean that's not very long and you're fully clothed. And the idea is that even with 5 minutes, although you're really probably not going to break a sweat, they think that just giving you that 5 minutes of infrared radiation will start mobilizing it out of tissue. So although you're not going to sweat it out, you can still get it out of tissue. You'll eventually pee it and poop it out. But I'm like, well, that's kind of genius. If that works as well as
Yeah.
advertised, particularly for someone like me who's unfortunately very heat intolerant, I can't do the long-term sauna.
Yeah.
If I could go in for 5 minutes and get the health benefits, that's great.
That's great. And it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Anybody can do 5 minutes.
Okay. I
I
want
don't
to
care
see
how
that. I
busy
want to
you
see
are.
that
You
one.
can't tell me you
Right?
don't have 5 minutes.
Exactly. Exactly. That
So
would be
more
huge.
to come on that.
Okay.
Hopefully next time I
I'm gonna
see
keep
him,
you
we'll have
posted.
some updates on whether they actually started that. But I
Yeah.
like that idea. Like, yeah, if we can just mobilize that out of tissue a little bit better, and we see this sometimes when people get body work, they go for like a deep tissue massage or sometimes osteopathic work, and they'll say afterwards, "Oh my gosh, I really felt like I just ran a marathon." It's like, yeah, when you start mobilizing all those toxins, if your body's not getting rid of them efficiently, again, it'll make you feel pretty crummy. So I like that idea if it's a more gentle way to do it without making you feel overly toxic.
Right.
That'd be very cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for the heat intolerant patients like you, and just in general, and the time averse.
Exactly. I know. I mean, I have a big box sauna, and when I lived in Connecticut, I was, of course, in retrospect, I kept it in the basement, which was a terrible idea because the basement was always like 60 degrees. And so you would turn the sauna on. It would take an hour and a half or 2 hours just to get up to 120 degrees. So you always had to really plan when you wanted to use the sauna. It's not like you just turn it on. That's what I love about Relax Sauna is that it heats up in 3 minutes.
Cool.
So it's very fast. And again, for people where time is important and you don't want to wait, a long time for the sauna to heat up, that one's pretty efficient.
Cool.
Well, I know we've been talking about just like general health. I know, you're a Lyme specialist. I just want to ask, for people who have been dealing with Lyme and tick-borne illness, again, just any kind of parting thoughts. And, if you've been dealing with a while, um, what do you say to someone who feels like they keep hitting walls, they feel frustrated? What's your best advice for those folks?
Yeah, I'm a pretty stubborn practitioner. I don't give up very easily. So I'm always looking under new rocks. So if I have someone that's with me and working with me and we're making headway or plateaued and we're just stuck, what am I missing? What else is going on? So I think it's always good to take a fresh set of eyes. And sometimes that means meeting with a different provider, either in our office or somewhere else, just to get a new take on it. So someone with fresh eyes can come in and say, oh, let's go back to this or circle back to this or try this test or look under this rock. What are we missing? What are the roadblocks? What are the hurdles here? Because everyone is so complex and there's so many different things going on. So if you've been at it for a long time, there may be a different view. Maybe that's a parasite or mold or mast cells or something that you haven't really explored that's still kind of lingering in there. It's always good to go back to the foundations and make sure, we're doing everything we can in that realm. But I think it's worth trying to find a provider who will listen and who will work with you and who will continue to dig and explore and not just throw their hands up, and try different things. And sometimes we just have to try some different things. And there's not necessarily a black and white test that proves there's a parasite. but there's enough other clues that we try that pathway and see if we can make some progress in it. I'm a detective and a stubborn provider in that sense. So for me, it's about not giving up hope but also I think it's also important for the patient to look back and see how far they have come and not focus on the negativity. And some of that is not just vagus nerve, but neurolimbic system repair. That's a big hurdle that a lot of providers and patients miss, and how important it is to start to retrain your brain. Because when we are sick for a long time, you become used to that, and your brain and your immune system and everything is used to that. And as you start to heal, that can linger. So it's kind of keeping you in that sick state, even though you're kind of in this pathway. So you have to bring that up and retrain the brain to live in this new, healthier spot. And it can take some work to do, you know, kicking and screaming, come with me, limbic system. We can do this. We
Yeah.
don't need to, send out so much inflammation all the time. I love you. Thank you for trying to heal me and protect me, but we're in a different spot. Like we can do this. Um, I think that can make leaps and bounds for health and healing as well. And there's some great programs out there that can help with that process. And yeah, so keep looking, and focus on how far you've come and not just on how stuck you feel in the bad stuff. We've got to retrain. We got to think differently. We've got to focus on the forward and the future and the good too.
Absolutely.
That's easier said than done. I get that.
True. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. And I know you have your own program, Heal with Case at healwithcase.com. Tell us a little bit about your program.
Yeah. So the groundwork for healing course on healwithcase.com is my first course that I created. And this is for anybody with any kind of chronic issue whatsoever who wants to start to help themselves feel better. Maybe you're waiting to get in to see Dr. Ingels because he's got a wait list. And what do you do in the meantime, right? You can go to Heal with Case, get the groundwork course, and start on all the basics we talked about: food, sleep, movement, stress, detox, with a lot of actionable tools and ways to get you going. You can go at your pace. You can do, one video, one section a month or a week, or however fast you want to go through it, and start to really build those foundations. So when you find the right provider and you get in to see that doc, you're at a different spot and you guys can hit the ground running and really go from there, or potentially not even need to see the doctor because you feel so much better and you made all these changes, and life is in a different spot. So I really wanted to create a space for people who don't have access maybe to integrative medicine and holistic cares, or are waiting to get in to see people and need somewhere to start, to go back to that, as well as patients who just need to go back to those roots, go back to that groundwork and make sure that they're doing everything they can to stay healthy. That's an important part of staying healthy as well. So there'll be more courses to come. I'm really excited. I'm going to do a Lyme one that's on the works right now, and then we'll have more from there. I really want a library for patients and for the world to help themselves and work these journeys and learn a lot about it, and what's going on with their health.
Well, we will absolutely drop the link to the website so that people who are interested can take a look at the program and hopefully sign up for it. Again, it's just a great resource. And I'm sure for those who've tuned in, you can tell why Dr. Kelley here is one of my favorite doctors. And I just appreciate, that again, you take on these really, again, difficult, challenging cases, but with such compassion and empathy for folks, and really doing that hard detective work, it's a lot. And again, when you're a working mom, that's like more to add to your plate. But I just really appreciate your dedication and what you do for patients. So again, thank you so much for really being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the good work you do as well.